Hello and welcome to Moderate Fantasy Violence, a podcast about pop culture and the world around it. I'm Nick.
And I'm Alastair.
And this fortnight, in a slight change to the advertised programme, we have not been able to leave the house and see Sinners because Alastair has been down with the COVID. But it does mean we have a brilliantly themed Marvel double bill, as we have seen the new Marvel film Thunderbolts, *, and we have also stayed in our homes and watched Friendly Neighbourhood Spider-Man Season 1 on Disney+. This is the new animated series about, well, my favourite wall crawler. But before we dig into a new batch of Marvel, Alastair, what else have you consumed whilst stuck in your house?
Yes, well, I've had a lot of opportunities to consume media whilst I've been stuck at home, very 2020 style, down with the COVID, as you say. Quite a few things. If people have been following the MFV Twitter account, they'll see my history of what I've been looking at. But what I'd like to recommend is Terminator Zero, which is on Netflix. It's a new anime. Well, new as in a few months old. It's a new anime set in the Terminator universe. It's in Tokyo when a Terminator is sent back from the future to kill a man who's building a rival AI to Skynet. And the Terminator kidnaps his children to threaten them to achieve this. And the story also follows a human woman who's sent from the future to stop this happening. Yeah, this show really kind of, I felt, captures the essence of the Terminator story, which is actually more than quite a lot of the recent movies have done. It's really brought the story down to the essence of the sort of chase format interspersed with like violent action scenes. That which is kind of the essence of what you want from your Terminator story. Yeah, simple, effective story with a lot of tense drama in it. So yeah, if you're a fan of the Terminator franchise, this is actually probably one of the better installments that's out there.
Yeah, I know we briefly discussed covering this when it came out, but I was not a big enough Terminator fan, so the idea kind of died on the vine. I know that, the first two films are good, and then after that, we enter bad territory, but, it's nice that they finally managed to weaponise that nostalgia to produce something at least half decent.
Yeah. I think relocating into Japan and doing this anime gives it a sort of different vibe, so which adds something fresh to the mix. Yeah, probably the Terminator Dark Fate that we reviewed in the podcast is probably the best Terminator installment since T2, though I have a soft spot for the Sarah Chronicles TV show, which had some good episodes in it. But yeah, this, I think, avoids the mistake that some of the recent Terminator films have fallen into, which is there's not really too much Terminator lore or like excessive complexity. It's more, again, a sort of a chase thing with bad Terminator coming after these people and a human from the future trying to protect them. It's got various little nods to other Terminator films. There's a shootout in a police station, which is very much a nod to Terminator 1. There's a bit when the Terminator is disguised himself itself as a cop, which again a sort of nod to Terminator 2 in that regards. Yeah, they're traveling back to 1997, which is also capturing that kind of 90s vibe from Terminator 2. So there's these little nods there for the fans.
Yeah. I'm glad the fans finally have something good to enjoy. Much like Alien, it's nice when they occasionally make a good one.
Yeah, exactly.
And indeed Predator. In fact, a lot of films from that era have really struggled to be franchised in the way that the rights holders seem to want. Yeah,
I know that Alien, Predator, they've had more success with like comics and video games and things like that. I guess maybe there's like less pressure and smaller budget, which means you can give a creator, the Alien universe to write a comic and they can do something interesting or unusual with it because it doesn't have to appeal to like absolutely everyone like a big film does. And probably, I guess, like similar here, this doesn't have the pressure of being a massive film that's like a global mega smash that brings in like millions of dollars. It can just be like a story that's popular on Netflix, which I suppose probably again allows them to do something a bit different and a bit creative. Like I say, the Japanese setting is a bit different, weaving in various Japanese characters. Yeah, they sort of link in as well the 1995 sarin subway attack, which is a real event that happened in Japan, because they're traveling back to 1997, so it's just immediately after that. So they're kind of weaving in bits and pieces of kind of, what would be contemporary experience for Japanese people. What's also quite interesting is that the war-torn Skynet devastated future is 2025. So that's
oh no, not again.
A bleak look at the present. I quite like the fact that they did that rather than just setting it in like 2050 or something like that.
I mean, I'm not a scholar of the Terminator arts, but haven't most of the Terminator stuff that's tried to set substantial chunks of it in the dystopian future been kind of rubbish?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, generally the essence of the Terminator story, which is what this nails, is machines traveling back into the past. Yeah, and then you've got one sort of souped up powerful killing machine versus modern tech, whereas the ones with actually in the dystopian future, well, they just end up being just generic sci-fi action future things, people fighting machines in like a sort of blasted hellscape. We've seen it in everything from like Doctor Who to endless like novels. So again, it loses something of the freshness that certainly the original Terminator had, which was done very much as like sort of B-movie schlocky action thing. It just managed to capture, some contemporary fears about technology, having Arnold Schwarzenegger in it doing a good performance, because, he can't really act brilliantly, but he can do a sort of impassive machine. But that's kind of what you want from your Terminator installments. I mean, they've kept the date of Judgment Day from Terminator 2 of 1997. So and Terminator fans who've been following this review will have noticed that they travel back to 1997, and that's where most of the events are set in Japan. So Judgment Day is weaved into the plot, which I guess I won't say more about that because you might want to watch it, but you get to see how Judgment Day plays out in Japan, whereas all previous depictions have been set in America.
Well, again, anything they could do to make it not feel like a retread at this point, I guess. I mean, one of the reported problems with a lot of the recent Terminator films, certainly I saw T3 and that other one, was it Dark Fate? The one where Arnie came back?
Yeah, Dark Fate we covered on the podcast, and they also got the woman, I forgot her name now, who played Sarah Connor in Terminator 2.
Yeah, and both of them, T3 was kind of middling and Dark Fate was alright, but they're both kind of rehashing things people liked from the first two.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I'll probably never eclipse the success of Terminator 2. It's very much the high watermark, I think, for the franchise. But again, this just being able to do just a Japanese set Terminator story, again, with low expectations of it just has to be a successful anime, not a global smash hit film, means that it's actually successful. And as you say, we are in a year of 90s revival nostalgia. There's a new Predator film this year, and there's the Alien TV show. They're all things to look forward to.
Yeah, I suppose people used to talk about what specific thing was currently hot in nostalgia, and now it just feels like everything's going on at the same time.
Yeah. It's almost as if Hollywood's just desperately grasping around for something for people to connect with. We've got, video game adaptations going on over here. We've got classic sci-fi adaptations going on over there. We've got 90s nostalgia. Obviously, they're still churning out comic book movies. We'll come to that in a bit. Yeah, I think they're just trying to see what sticks.
Ah, yes, the eternal quest for the next big thing that we keep banging on about.
Yeah. If you like Terminator, I can recommend Terminator Zero. I hope they do a second season. There is an interesting cliffhanger that it's left on. It's a good bit of Terminator media. Anyway, that's what I've been up to whilst I've been slowly recovering from COVID. Nick, what have you been up to since we last spoke?
In the last few weeks, I have been reading Revival, a comic series by Tim Seeley and Mike Norton, which was published, I think, mostly in the 2010s. This is about a small town in Wisconsin which finds suddenly that the people who die there are returning from the dead as these sort of immortal beings. It's a premise that I think I've seen done before, but nonetheless, it's got an interesting sort of crime horror take here. It's the kind of middle of nowhere rural American noir, which you see a lot on screen and stuff. It's kind of Fargo does something similar, I guess, and there's a few Coen Brothers films that I think venture into this territory. It's, maybe a bit more serious than some of those. There's not really a broad sense of comedy. It is just about the local sheriff and his two daughters, one of whom is a fellow cop, and the other one is this disaffected student who finds herself unexpectedly being murdered and coming back as one of these revivals. And then there's the ongoing investigation into what exactly has caused the revivals and what exactly they are and what mysterious forces might be gathering around them. And then there's people obviously getting weird about it and thinking it's a sign of the rapture or something like that. And there's also the investigation into what killed the younger of the sheriff's two daughters. So it's a crime noir urban fantasy story, which if you've read many of my comics, you'll over this sort of thing with death fantasy, people returning from the dead for a mysterious reason. It's very much in my wheelhouse. So I enjoyed this.
Yeah, sounds really good. Sounds like there's quite a lot of different plot threads. Some of them, I guess, more focused on characters and mysteries about the individual characters, and some of it more focused on probing the wider mysteries of the world. And they've got a cop or a sheriff as the main character, which, as we've discussed in the podcast, these are good main characters for writers because they're people who go and investigate stuff and thus generate plot.
Yeah, I mean, in practice, the main characters, I guess, are the two daughters. Dana Cypress, who is the cop, the sort of junior cop, while her father is the sheriff, and M. Cypress, who is the student, the dead one. Yeah, one's a cop and the other's this somewhat vigilante, or this person sort of investigating revival stuff off the books, especially stuff relating to her own murder. So it does become this sort of two-pronged crime story, and obviously her sister being this revival vigilante does cause problems for the cop one.
Yeah, it does sound very good. So what's the art like? What is the sort of graphic style for this rural crime story?
Oh, it's going quite grounded. It's trying to stress, the normality of most things, so that occasionally when there's a few bits where creepy out of this world stuff happens, or there's a few genuinely horrible bits of body horror, or people being chopped up, or the fact that revivals can chop bits off their body or lose their teeth and they just sort of grow back. People chopping up revivals to eat their flesh because they've decided it'll give them some blessing or something. So most of the art is quite sort of grounded in comic book realism style, and as a result, the occasional moments of fantasy weirdness or horror disgustingness hit a bit harder.
That does sound pretty grim, I must say, actually, yeah, and probably very effective.
Yeah, as you say, it's a lot of people talking and cops running around in quite a grounded style, then suddenly you turn the page and there's blood everywhere. Yeah, it's good, it's well done.
Yeah. No, that sounds good. Does sound very, very good. Yeah, I do like the that sort of rural noir setting. There are quite a lot of great media in that vibe. Yeah, as you mentioned, yeah, Coen Brothers have done quite a few of those. Possibly the best being No Country for Old Men, which is really quite grim and tense and scary. So definitely a film I recommend.
Yeah, it employs a lot of the tropes of that genre. There's, the weird guy living on the edge of town. There's the local Confederate loving racist. There's, the local meth head burnouts and what they're now doing in their shed. It's leading into that genre, but it's fun to see it done with this sort of fantasy element mixed in.
I get the sense there's like a kind of broadcaster characters kind of encompassing this whole town.
Yeah, as I say, you've got the cop and her sister as mostly the point of view characters, but there's a lot of people. I'm just coming towards the end of it now. I'm on like volume 8, I think, the last one. And yeah, at this point, there's a lot of local residents who I'm somewhat familiar with. Well, obviously at this point also, because it's nearly the end of the story, a lot of them are getting killed off.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So how many issues is there in total? Seems like quite a substantial story.
It's just under 50, I think, about 47, 48.
Yeah, so that's a reasonable chunk of story there.
It's the sort of 5-ish year run, but a lot of these series tend to go for 4 or 5 years. As I think I've said before, a lot of these sort of comic series seem to think that's a good amount of time to get a bit of world building and then an ending in.
Yeah, seems like an appropriate length for storytelling, yeah. And also probably one that lends itself to be adapted into a sort of, 3-4 season TV show.
Yeah, I mean, funny you should mention that. The reason I decided to finally read this after having it in my Comixology account and on my vague to read list for years is because there's a TV show launching in the next couple of months, I think.
Oh, really? And what platform?
It's on the Sci-Fi Channel in America, which I don't think has a specific vendor here, so who knows? If it gets any traction, it might turn up, or we might never hear about it again. This has happened with other similar comic adaptations.
I think Now puts out a lot of sci-fi stuff here, but I could be wrong on that. But anyway, I guess maybe, if there's buzz around it, we might end up covering it on the podcast.
Yeah, I may check out at least a bit of it out of curiosity, but yeah, if it turns out to actually be good, maybe we'll go further. Have to wait and see.
Well, keep an eye on Nick's social media profiles, Blue Sky, etc., and the podcast one for more in the future. Next up, this episode, we will be discussing Thunderbolts, *, the new film from Marvel. Yelena, played by Florence Pugh, has lost her passion for her job as a Black Ops operative for a shadowy corporation. When she's hired to stop supervillain Ghost from committing a robbery, she is caught in a web of villains such as US Agent and Taskmaster, all hired to assassinate each other to cover up the company's experiments. They must unite against their former paymaster, who wants them dead, along with the mysterious Bob, whose strange abilities allude to a new threatening supervillain. We saw this film in the cinema recently. Nick, what did you think of it?
Yeah, as basically everyone has said, I thought this was decent, strong stuff. I thought it was a good combination of feeling kind of fresh and distinct and having characters who actually felt different to what we've seen a million times before, but also doing the Marvel formula in a way that felt consistent. Yeah, I think having Florence Pugh in it helps a lot. She's definitely doing a lot to anchor this. I'm glad that they're giving her a big vehicle after a few years. In some ways, this basically feels like a Black Widow sequel, to be honest. They could have called this Black Widow and the Thunderbolts or something, but I guess they've decided they want to try and make it as new viewer friendly as possible, so play down the idea that it's part of some massive series.
Yeah, exactly. This has got, as well as Florence Pugh in it, it's got David Harbour's back, the Taskmaster's back as well. Yeah, so you're picking up some threads that left before, but also it's a reasonable jumping on point. Partly because this feels like a bit more of a return to form for Marvel, in that it's kind of got that Marvel format that we've praised a lot on the podcast, and others have tried to emulate and has worked very well from the past. That essential formulation of humour, strong, likeable characters, action, and the sort of bantery, humoury sauce sort of laid over the top. And there's been a few films recently that haven't quite got that right. They've either not been particularly funny, such as the most recent Captain America movie, or, they haven't had particularly interesting or relatable characters. The actions just felt a bit generic, but this one seems to have pulled it all together. It reminds you that when the Marvel format is working, it is good fun and just creates really entertaining cinema.
Yeah, I mean, it feels, as I say, they've done a good job of making this feel like the beginning of a new thing. They've spent time bringing in the characters, they've spent time making us like them. Again, Florence Pugh especially gets a lot of characterization, as does David Harbour. Bucky, I think, actually feels like he works in this after a few years where he feels like he's kind of just drifted around the MCU waiting for someone to come up with an idea to use him. But this idea of him as the sort of slightly more experienced, but not too competent, lower A-list, upper B-list guy in charge of this group of total losers does actually kind of work for him. So yeah, I enjoyed this. I think it felt like a good combination of character and tone. And there's also a bit of a sort of mental health theme going on in a way that, I mean, it's a theme that's been hit a lot in media in the last, like 10, 15 years. This idea of struggling with your demons, but it commits to it enough, I think, with enough sincerity, but it doesn't just feel like they're just name-checking it. I think there is enough real confrontation with the characters' demons and despair and shame that it actually feels like they're actually doing it rather than just throwing in some pleasantries.
Yeah, I mean, there's kind of more to it than just superheroes like punching each other and things like that. Or in this case, they're sort of black ops, super spy type superheroes. So it's, I guess, less high-powered punching, more, roundhouse kicks and throws and things like that. Yeah, it's got sort of slightly martial artsy vibe to it, to the action, rather than just being kind of like, action that's just people fighting and things like that. There's some character development to it. There's some depth to what's going on. There's people overcoming various things. And that, again, it gives it a bit more, to anchor you emotionally into the story than just good guys fighting bad guys. And obviously you're on the side of the good guys. I mean, there's various points when in order to win an action scene or to defeat a villain, the characters have to overcome something personally within them, like have to grow as a person a bit. All these solo black ops operatives who are kind of like jaded and cynical, they have to learn to trust each other, or they have to overcome more towards the end of the film, something to do with their mental health or their demons made literal. So by combining that element of like there must be some kind of character growth, the characters must go through something to win, not just punch their way to victory, you're kind of more emotionally invested in the story, and it's just a bit more there than just empty spectacle, which again is something that Marvel, when it works well, does work really well. I'm thinking of things like Iron Man 3, which has things of like Tony Stark overcoming his PTSD at various points, even like the original Thor, which isn't one of the absolute best movies, but there's moments when Thor has to he has to learn and realize that he can't just punch everything. He has to show other types of courage. So yeah, just having that bit of characterization, that is kind of what separates your kind of really emotionally engaging summer blockbuster from one that is just good guys punching bad guys.
Yeah, I think the characters, especially again the Pugh and Harbour characters, have a good relationship, and it actually feels like they grow and they go through something, and that does a lot to make this sort of thing work. I mean, obviously I'm not pretending that this action fantasy special effects blockbuster is some sort of therapeutic treatise that's going to save lives, but I do think they make enough effort with it and put enough sincerity behind it that it works for what it is.
Yeah, it makes you feel more emotionally invested. It's what you don't get from, say, a Transformers film, which is just literally just shapes smashing into each other. You need that characterization. I mean, as we said, the Marvel source is action plus some banter, but the other crucial element is likable characters, which is what they have here.
Yeah, but if anything, they sometimes slightly overplay the banter in this. There are moments in this where I thought we could actually use a bit less overly cute banter dialogue, but not to an extent that ruined the film for me or anything.
Yeah, well, David Harbour's very much the comedy relief. But he is very funny. I mean, he's primarily a comedy actor, and his character is just ridiculous. The Red Guardian is sort of washed up communist, literal Soviet communist superhero. He's quite silly.
Well, yeah, it works for him. He is a silly character. Again, the fact that he can pull off the swings into seriousness when he actually needs to does work as well. The fact that he's always well-meaning, even if he's ultimately ridiculous. They do actually pull that off.
A lot of the other humour is the other characters rolling their eyes at him as well.
Sometimes there's a bit too much of, I don't know, maybe a bit too much of the Thunderbolts, other than David Harbour squabbling like children in a way that sometimes feels a bit at odds with the slightly dour tone, but I did laugh at several of those jokes, so who can say?
Yeah. I mean, it links into the plot thread of them coming together as a team. Yeah, there's elements to it, but yeah, I thought it was a good ensemble, and they've got a range of characters. We've all seen them before in various Marvel properties, but if you haven't seen all the Marvel properties that these characters are set up in, such as Ant-Man and the Wasp or Falcon and Winter Soldier, then characters will jump on at this point because everyone's kind of introduced, everyone's given a round bit of characterization. They've setting up the dynamics of the team, which again also essential elements to make this kind of film work.
Yeah, I thought John Walker, who was okay in Falcon and Winter Soldier, he had his moments. I think the actor did a lot to sell the character in that. He's actually quite good here. I think he's both well written and well acted, and he manages to put off this sort of I'm an asshole but I'm just about likeable enough thing which makes him work as a co-protagonist of this film.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And definitely I think the right decision to focus on Florence Pugh as the main character. You want one character to stand out as the lead. In a lot of these ensembles before, it's been Iron Man, I suppose, is the most recognizable of these Marvel superheroes. I mean, she is definitely the best performer in the cast. She's obviously incredibly talented, brings real emotion and heart to the character. Her character is one of the bigger emotional journeys, again, with her sort of still recovering from the death of her sister in the previous film, and this kind of strained relationship with her father. But there's lots of really little bits that are well done, such as the Walker character brags early on that he's decent family man, and then when it's revealed that his family left him, you can see that Yelena's absolutely devastated. But it's all done just in her facial expressions and reaction shots. She manages to convey all of that emotional beat without the need for any dialogue or anything like that. And the big emotional moment of the film is again, I think as you said before, is her and the David Harbour character, her father, having a genuine emotional heart to heart just before the big action scene at the end. And again, it's the strongest emotional scene of the film because Florence Pugh really sells it and really sells someone having an emotional crisis that we can all relate to, am I a good person, am I doing the right thing, that kind of emotion, but also link it back to their supervillains doing supervillain stuff as well in a way that doesn't seem incongruous. And it's largely because of she gives this character real humanity. You can believe this is a real person.
Yeah, no, that scene's really good. I also found it weirdly, affecting and/or, interesting that the traumatic flashback for the John Walker character where they reveal that, as you say, his family have left him, wasn't some big dramatic moment or him flipping his lid and raising his hand to them or something. It was just him scrolling his phone when he's meant to be watching the baby. It's very,
It's subtle.
That was subtle and weirdly almost even sadder.
Yeah.
It just plays into the sort of, the slightly dour tone of void and depression that this film is trying to evoke. Not everything is, the biggest, most dramatic things in the world. Sometimes it's just a bit sad. Sometimes there's just this sense that there's just nothing, that just everything's just a bit meaningless. And again, sometimes I feel that some of the slightly cute Marvel dialogue is going against this tone, but it does mostly commit to it. It does mostly work.
Yeah. And I guess it moves into the darker elements with the villain and things like that. I mean, one of those things that, again, it's using the sort of Marvel lore and superhero stuff well is the villain amongst his superpowers is the ability to kind of trap you in your nightmares or your worst memories, which obviously that's a useful bit of characterization. If someone's superpower is to catapult them into your worst memories, I mean, it says a lot about a person to see their worst memories on screen. So that is again, there's some thought has been put into this to be okay, well, that's kind of cool horror tinged scene when someone gets trapped in a horrible memory of theirs, but also it kind of adds something to the character. Again, it's just doing those little things, and when Marvel do them well, it really makes something that's entertaining and has an emotional connection to the audience.
Yeah, again, it's not changing the world, it's not an art film, but it's working well within the constraints of what it is. It's using its supervillain in a good, interesting way that builds on the theme of the film, which is something that other Marvel films have not done. And, it gives you the big upscale action, it gives you a bit of special effect, but it doesn't just turn into a CGI festival of shapes slamming together.
Yeah, exactly. Because people do want to have emotional connections to these characters, which is why, again, people always cite the Transformers movies, for example, as being
crap.
Just kind of, just generically, special effects fest where giant robots punch other giant robots. And of the Transformers films that people seem to actually like, Bumblebee is the one when it's about a girl, and her relationship to her car that turns out to be a Transformer, and with a sort of lost childhood, loss of innocence arc sort of bolted on, so that's the thing, that you need that characterization. There's a reason why people, as we were talking about at the top, people arc back to these classic films from the 80s, 90s, your Die Hard, Predator, Terminator 2, whatever, is because they do have a bit of characterization. I mean, Predator probably has less characterization than Thunderbolts, but there is a likable main character, and you've got this dynamic of these group of dudes, soldiers fighting, who've got each other's back and are fighting together. There's some characterization there you can anchor onto. Again, Terminator 2's got the whole mother-son dynamic, again, parental issues all trapped up in that. Yeah, there's more going on there that gives you that emotional hook. There's a reason why those movies endured, and there's also been ridiculous numbers of muscle men action movies. They churned out loads of them in the 80s and 90s, and they've kind of all been forgotten because they didn't have that little source. And again, in I don't know, 30, 40 years' time, and we look back on now, yeah, we'll have forgotten all of the grey, superheroes just punching shapes films like, I don't know, like Man of Steel or whatever. But this sort of film, people will go like, yeah, that was good. There was because it's got that heart to it as well as some cool action scenes.
Yeah, this was a strong one, I think. It does also, link into Marvel continuity. There's obviously in subtle ways in that a lot of the characters have been in previous films, and also in major ways in that it doesn't cliffhanger out to another film, but it does very much tell you this is going to continue in another film. In a way that I think more or less works. It doesn't ruin the film or make it feel like it's just an episode of a TV show. Do we want to drop some sort of spoiler wall and talk about exciting things like what the punctuation mark in the title means?
Yeah, I feel we've discussed it enough. Yeah, obviously, yeah, if you haven't seen the film and don't want to be spoiled, yeah, now's your time to bow out. Spoiler wall imminent.
Yep. Spoiler wall, asterisk. So, honestly, if you're vaguely in the sort of comics nerd superhero sphere, the odds are that you've had the asterisk spoiled for you, even if you haven't seen the film. God knows I did, because I took 3 weeks to see it, to be fair. But yeah, the asterisk in the Thunderbolts title refers to the fact that they're actually the new Avengers, as is revealed at the end of the film, in a sort of desperate PR move by the villain, who basically makes them the new Avengers in order to stop them beating her up, which is quite funny and quite a nice beat, and works with the general tone of the film, and therefore stops this feeling too much like a cynical twist designed to set up future Marvel films.
I mean, one of the themes of the films or plot arcs is that the old Avengers are gone, they're not coming back. We need new heroes to defend ourselves. Yeah, it kind of ties in with that and things like that. And also this sort of, the whole theme of it, as you said, is like, it's darker and there's a sense, these are black ops and in a sort of murky world. And it's an amoral, world. You have the Avengers as the kind of good guys looking out for everyone. So it does kind of work as well. I mean, obviously, this is a Marvel film. It's part of this gargantuan, many decade long at this point, ongoing cycle of content production. So yeah, it's teeing up the next film also in the series, fair enough. But to be fair, actually, especially if you watch the post-credit bit, it is actually nice to get to the point where they're actually setting up the next film in the franchise rather than something that they may come back to at some point in the future, which is what a lot of the post-credits scenes have been for the last few years.
Yeah, but that is the formula that had a lot of success for them in the early days. It was very much this film told its own story, then had a post-credit scene that trailed the next film. Like, I think Iron Man 2 led into 4, which led into Captain America, which led into Avengers. And obviously things have got a lot more complicated, but I do think that this film, where we're behind a spoiler wall, so here's a spoiler, has a post-credit scene which directly leads into Fantastic Four, which comes out in a couple of months. That feels a lot more solid to me. That feels like something I could actually get semi-excited about, whereas there's no reason to get excited about a lot of these other teases, like Thingy from Ted Lasso playing Hercules or Charlize Theron playing Clea in Doctor Strange, unless you're, a nerd who knows who those characters are, and I am a nerd who knows who those characters are, and even I don't care.
Yeah, and also you have to wait around for God knows how long before the films happen. I know some of this is connected to Marvel criminology in that they're going through their big reset following the unfortunate situation with Jonathan Majors, and also, some poor box office from some high-profile films, or at least box office that hasn't quite been up to what Disney want. So, who knows what's been thrown out in the past is going to actually get picked up, which is, again, why it's nice actually to have this sets up a film that we know is coming out in like 3 months' time, probably less.
Yeah, although, again, what's nice is, for all we can talk about Marvel criminology, you don't need to know most of that to watch this. It's fairly straightforward. Here's a story, here are some characters, here's an ending, here's a little tease for the next film, which comes out in a couple of months. They have actually managed to shave most of it down and make it fairly straightforward. I guess there's a vague sense that these are characters you might not recognise unless you've seen, Black Widow, Falcon and Winter Soldier, and Ant-Man and the Wasp. Also, although, I know someone's got to be the character who doesn't get much to do, but I did think Hannah John Kamen as Ghost was a bit underserved here.
Yeah, she's a good performer.
Yeah, she's good. I watched all 5 series. Was it 5? I watched all the series, anyway, of that show Killjoys that she was co-lead of. And yeah, she's good. I was somewhat looking forward to seeing her do more in Marvel films, and I'm still looking forward to that. I guess now that she's officially on the new Avengers, there is a chance she might get a storyline in the upcoming Avengers films. Although considering that there's going to be about 1 million people in that film, I'm not going to hold my little breath too much.
Well, we'll find out next year when Avengers Doomsday comes out. Yeah, which again is also very much been teed up by this. Again, centering on this group of characters and with, again, focusing on Florence Pugh as the most talented person is probably a good sign for that film and the trajectory they're going. But we'll see when it comes out. But I think what you were saying about, the ending and them teeing up a film that's actually we're gonna see soon kind of links back to what we were saying before, which is that this does feel like a return to form. It's kind of an old school success. It feels very very much like one of their older, better films that they did in the past after a few not so good ones. So it's definitely amongst the top tier, maybe at the top third at least. But at this point, there's like probably somewhere like 30 films. So it's a reasonable number to beat out to get into the top third. But yeah, it feels like a return to form.
It's certainly, if we want to briefly get into league table shit, it's certainly since Endgame and No Way Home, the only film I'd say competing with this for the best film since then award is probably Guardians 3.
Yeah, genuinely emotionally moving as well.
So yeah, fair enough, good stuff. A positive MCU review in 2025. Who knew?
Who knew? Finally, this episode, we will be discussing Your Friendly Neighbourhood Spider-Man. This new animated Spider-Man TV show starts the Peter Parker story from the origin point, with teenaged Peter getting bitten by a spider and gaining superpowers on his first day at a new high school. He then balances his normal teenage life against his second life, fighting crime, teaming up with Norman Osborn to supercharge his tech, and his friend joining a gang, as well as a crime wave led by some high-tech villains. We have seen the complete first season of this show on Disney+. Nick, as our resident Spider-Man expert, what did you make of the show?
Yeah, I enjoyed this. I am, as that suggests, a bit of a sucker for a decent take on Spider-Man. And this is decent stuff. This is strong. It works. It's fun. It sells the characters. I don't think it quite sings, transcends, and becomes amazing. On the Marvel recent Disney Plus animation scale, there's What If, which I think is ultimately a bit ropey. There's X-Men 97, which was amazing. And then there's this, which is pretty good, but not quite amazing. But nonetheless, I'm always here for a solid take on Spider-Man. And there's a few fun, unique moments here. I like the animation style. I like the way that this Peter looks a bit more like the old school nerd he used to look like in the 60s rather than the more handsome one we've kind of grown into. I liked the take on the villains. I liked the more tech based street level villains rather than some of the more cosmic stuff you often get in the films. Yeah, I'm here for this. I'm enjoying it. As I say, I don't think it's going to rock your socks and rewrite your life. It is not as good as, say, Spider-Verse, but it's a strong Spider-Man show. Yeah,
absolutely. I thought this was fun and exciting. It's fast paced. It's got a good story to it. There's quite a lot of different plot threads to it. As I alluded to at the top, there's the story of Peter Parker finding his way, trying to find out, sort of balance his identity with Spider-Man and trying to get into the vibe of fighting crime. There's the plot line of him involved with Oscorp and with Norman Osborn as like a father figure. There's the plot of Doc Ock supercharging these street level gangsters and stuff. There's the plot of his friend joining a gang. There's the plot of this other gang led by Scorpion. So there's quite a lot of plot elements to it, but what this means is that there's always something exciting happening, there's always something driving something forwards. It's always kind of moves quite quickly from plot point to exciting point to exciting point, because it's 10 episodes, but they're only like half an hour in length. So yeah, they're cramming quite a lot, but they do effectively weave it together and keep the story as quite exciting.
Yeah, there's a lot going on here. I think there's a fun use of these different story elements to balance each other and interact, and what if this thing affected that thing. I liked the basic premise. I mean, if you really wanted to shave down all the other stuff and say what is the premise of this take on Spider-Man, it's basically the Marvel Cinematic Universe Spider-Man, but what if Norman Osborn was his billionaire benefactor instead of Tony Stark? That's basically the take. There are MCU things that are happening in the background. There's a mention of the Sokovia Accords. Iron Man turns up at one point. It's clearly broadly set in an alternate MCU, but with Norman Osborn, which obviously, works for me as a Spider-Man fan because he's actually a Spider-Man character. I'm not going to bitch about the MCU Spider-Man films because I enjoyed them, but it's nice to see a Spider-Man who isn't spending all his time hanging around these non-Spider-Man characters. It's nice to see a Spider-Man version of Spider-Man.
Yeah, this is very much the Spider-Man story. You've got a whole host of Spider-Man characters, you say. I mean, it's set in an Avengers universe. I'm not sure exactly on if this is the same universe as the films or slightly different one, or I suppose...
I mean, it quite clearly isn't the exact same MCU as the films. As I say, I think we just have to assume that we're in multiverse territory again and it's an alternate MCU, but I don't think it matters that much.
Yeah, but also at the same level, people are familiar enough with the MCU and the characters, they can just sort of broadly gesture at it and just you kind of accept it. They don't have to do lots of exposition. Like Iron Man's mentioned, there's a character from Wakanda. You don't really find out much about Wakanda, doesn't feel the need to explain what it is. There's just a character from Wakanda. It's mentioned. Daredevil, Doctor Strange turn up. They kind of assume, look, what this stuff is, just roll with it. That stuff is secondary to the main plot lines, which are, again, quite firmly rooted in characters. Like the one about the gangs, supercharged tech gangs, including like the Scorpion and things like that, is related back to the fact that one of Peter Parker's school friends is getting involved in the gang. It kind of loops back to this kind of circle of friends around Peter as a person. and then connecting that to Spider-Man, which is usually how the best Spider-Man stories have worked. I'm thinking Spider-Man Homecoming, Spider-Man 2, the Sam Raimi film, they've kind of also had that dynamic.
Yeah, I mean, if I had to place an influence, I think this feels like a sort of post-Invincible Spider-Man cartoon, but it's very much building up this supporting cast in this universe. And again, as I've said about Invincible, because it's not a movie, it doesn't have to, justify everyone's appearance by having them do a massive set piece. You can just have Iron Man or Daredevil just buzz on by, and it works, and it just makes it feel like it's placed within a universe.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. And some of it is like teasing up things for the future, such as Daredevil appears in a couple of scenes, and I think it's going to be back next season, things like that. But yeah, most of the characters are Spider-Man ones. Like, there's an impressive array of Spider-Man villains in this. We mentioned Scorpion, Doc Ock, the Rhino turns up. Yeah, Norman Osborn clearly traveling in the direction towards becoming the Green Goblin, and a few others I think you mentioned as well are alluded to as well.
Yeah, there's Chameleon, or someone who looks a lot like the Chameleon. There's a gender-swapped Doc Connors with an arm missing, who I imagine is going to go lizardy at some point if the show runs long enough. So yeah, there's a lot of Spider-Man stuff going on. I liked the Norman Osborn stuff, actually. I thought it threads the right balance of this storyline in that we know he's a baddie, but we could also believe that Spider-Man would trust him without making him seem like an idiot.
Yeah, and also, unlike maybe in a film, we can kind of go on an emotional journey with him. Well, we can go on a longer emotional journey with him. We can do this is that he can start off being like a good guy and slowly reveal that his megalomania is getting the better of him, his ambitions, and yeah, you kind of reveal that, he's not the nice guy he appears to, on the surface. And you kind of get that throughout the 10-episode arc, sort of slowly dripped in, again, alongside all these other plot lines. But at the first, you kind of invested in this relationship of him being the mentor and looking out for Peter and kind of wanting what's best for him. And then, yeah, by the end of it, you kind of really see that he's going in the villain direction. So there is a satisfactory arc there. But there's a lot of good characters in this, and each one's sort of built up as well. And what I also like about them, you'll get the sense that most people are like a nice guy. Even the character who becomes Tombstone, who's very much a jock. He's captain of the high school football team, or the quarterback or whatever.
Yeah, I think I've said before that Spider-Man works better in this sort of serialized form, I think, because you could just do these long-running soap opera storylines, which is the sort of thing they've always done in the comic, and it works. Whereas if you do it in a film, it always feels quite hyper-compressed. So yeah, I always enjoy when we get this sort of take on Spidey when it's done well, and they do this sort of deep bench of supporting cast who have their sort of ongoing storylines.
Yeah, exactly. It works well. And it links back to what I was saying before, that like there's a lot of plot elements, but you get like quite a lot of updates in each episode, which means it's fast paced, and it's always like driving towards something exciting happening. It's not one of those shows when like you feel like there's a lot of setup to something big that's coming down the line. There's kind of like something in each episode that's exciting and interesting. So yeah, unlike some of the Netflix Defenderverse shows where there was a lot of build up and episodes where things didn't necessarily like pay off, whereas this, because it's got so many plot lines, so many characters all be together, is like paying off quite quickly.
Yeah, I think it does a good job of bringing everything together by the end and leaving a lot hanging for the second season. Helpfully, they have been renewed for a second season, so they can afford to give us a bit of resolution, but not all the resolution. But also, there's some really good stuff in the finale. I don't know how much we need to spoil it, because I don't know if everyone in the world has watched this, but there's a very good reveal in the finale about how he got his powers in episode 1, which is very clever, and I thought played very interestingly with our expectations, in a way I probably can't describe without spoiling it.
No, exactly, yeah.
But it's a very, very good, well-executed reveal.
And picks up a well-known sci-fi trope, which even if I name the trope, do we want to just drop spoilers and talk about it?
I guess so.
Yeah.
I do genuinely implore you to watch the cartoon and probably don't listen to the spoilers we're about to drop, because they will spoil a major plot twist, but yeah, sure, go for it.
With substantial analysis. Yeah, I like the reveal at the end that Spider-Man is a bootstrap paradox, in that they go back in time and the spider is sent back in time to bite him and give him his powers, but the spider was made in the future based on research taken from Spider-Man. So yeah, there is no origin of Spider-Man. It's just a bootstrap paradox going round and round and round and round and round.
Yeah, I think a lot of Spider-Man stuff sometimes has to crowbar a bit to get the spider in and give him his powers. So I quite enjoyed this angle of, rather than having to get Peter somewhere where there's a irradiated spider, it just literally, yeah, as you say, it's a bootstrap paradox. He gets the powers from the spider, and then at the end of the season, the spider, which has been created from his DNA, falls through a time portal and bites him. Okay, whether that'll be picked up or have some effect on something, I don't know, but it's quite a neat little trick. And also, I think the way it's interesting, and this is what I said earlier about expectations, is because of what the MCU is currently doing, you kind of just see it and think, oh, it's some multiverse bullshit.
Yeah.
At the beginning, you kind of think, oh, I guess it's a spider from the multiverse. It's just come through a portal and bitten him because it was just passing by. That's some sort of multiverse version of Venom fighting a multiverse Doctor Strange. Blah 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 blah. And yeah, you don't really. I, at least, at no point until very, very close to it was revealed, entertained the possibility of time travel.
Yeah, I think also because in Spider-Verse, it is a multiverse thing that leads to the spider coming to Miles Morales' reality in that version. So I had that in mind while watching it as well. It's a good twist, and there's quite a lot of good twists along the way. Yeah, I like the story of like his friend becoming Tombstone. Again, a jock, but he's actually a nice guy, and he's nice to Peter. There's no high school bullying in this one. Everyone's kind of a decent guy trying to do the right thing, but then stuff gets in the way. And then, yeah, characters get dragged into these sort of darker things, such as becoming villains, things like that. Certainly the major characters like Tombstone, not the sort of one episode villains like the Rhino or whatever.
Yeah, I think the Tombstone stuff, I mean, the bit where he gets given the gang name Tombstone and then gets vaguely stone adjacent powers like 5 episodes later is a teeny bit on the nose. Could they not have held that off till he got the powers? But I don't know, it is what it is. You gotta throw the nerds something, I suppose. We're simple folk.
Yeah, well, as I'm not as much a Spider-Man expert as you, as soon as I saw that, I was like, okay, this is definitely an alluding to something. So I Googled Spider-Man Tombstone, and yep, Google served me the answers I was looking for. Probably not the only person who had to do that.
Yeah, but obviously I heard that and then immediately knew who it was. But because I was watching this with my partner, did not immediately start listing all the things that were going to happen in the name of preserving her enjoyment somewhat.
Yeah.
I'm a good person.
Some of the characters are slightly different takes on them. You've got the Rhino's gender swapped in this one. You said the Lizard is gender swapped as well. Things like that. So there are some slightly different takes on the characters. Oh yeah, and Norman and his son Harry are both black in this, which is, yeah, a different take on, well, I'm most familiar with the William Dafoe Green Goblin from both the Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies and Spider-Man No Way Home. So yeah, it's nice to see a different take on Norman Osborn. Yeah, have him as a sort of black entrepreneur rather than, I guess, the sort of slightly creepy William Dafoe guy who does creepy villain sort of very well.
Yeah, I mean, I think it also, because it's not just, the villain is now black, there's also Harry Osborn, who is now black as well, which obviously means there's a sympathetic character in there too, which I guess makes it a bit less, we made the villain black.
Yeah, exactly. But there's quite a wide variety of black characters in this show as well. There's a woman from Wakanda. You said there's the woman who's another sort of mentor figure for Peter, who you say will become the Lizard or may become the Lizard. She's also a black woman. There's Tombstone is also, yeah. Well, he lives in Harlem, I suppose, which is obviously a very black area of New York. But yeah, so there's quite a lot, and it kind of does a good job, I think, of reflecting the diversity of New York as well. The love interest in this she's Filipino. It's not, any of the famous Spider-Man love interests that I'm familiar with. MJ, or the other one whose name I can't remember now.
Gwen Stacy.
Gwen Stacy, that's it. Yeah.
Effort has definitely been made to avoid the regular love interests. Yeah, a lot of the other familiar characters are here. As we've said, a lot of Spider-Man characters in this Spider-Man show. But Gwen Stacy and Mary Jane are so far conspicuously absent. Of course, that often means that they will be introduced with fanfare in a later episode. But for now, it's interesting to see them do other things.
Yeah. Exactly. So, which is good, yeah. And like I say, you just get across the diversity of New York to have this very diverse cast. My one main criticism of the show is, to be fair, for Spider-Man, such a New York-based character, it didn't feel particularly New York, other than you did get across the diversity, but I guess it's the diversity of any major metropolitan centre in the world. It did kind of feel that like different versions of Spider-Man captured the New Yorker element much better. I think probably the one that's best for capturing New York as a place is the Sam Raimi one. So it's partly because especially the first one came out just after 9/11 and they really boosted up this kind of New York patriotism thing, and all the Sam Raimi Spider-Man films end with a shot of the American flag. So even though it gestures at it, like Harlem and 110th Street are mentioned several times and things like that, I just felt it could have felt a bit more New York. The Daredevil show recently, which we discussed, actually did a much better job of capturing New York as a place. But I mean, there is a lot to love in this show. I just feel that, the New Yorker element of Spider-Man could have been brought out a bit more.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, he is still a teenager in this, so I guess he's still quite at school. I don't know how New York you feel the Tom Holland ones are.
Probably a bit better. I quite like how the Tom Holland ones, the first one, well, it throws in some good New York landmarks. There's a major action scene on the Staten Island ferry. I quite like the bit in the Homecoming when he goes out to the suburbs and he can't swing because there aren't the buildings anymore. It does get across that New York is not just high rises. There are flatter bits. I mean, that's just quite a funny bit, but also does show New York. So obviously the second one isn't set in New York at all, of the Holland ones, but probably again, they're not don't have this super strong sense of place, and when it does have a sense of place, it's more just kind of like weaving in landmarks. The third one of the Tom Holland ones has the final action scene takes place at like Statue of Liberty. So yeah, probably the ones that capture the setting best again were the Sam Raimi ones. But I guess it's just one thing I'm looking for in my Spider-Man as someone who's a big consumer of New York media across everything from like Scorsese films, the more current stories, and also it is just something I'm interested in. Sense of place in media is just one of my things. I kind of seem to be quite attuned to it. Like I say, the Luke Cage show really captured the essence of Harlem, I thought, quite well. It's just one of the aspects in this, and as I said, there was a lot going on in this show, and it is very well balanced, all the different elements of it. It doesn't feel like it's shooting off in loads of different directions. It feels like it's following like a well constructed arc that's always driving you towards the next interesting thing. So it doesn't need more to it, I suppose is what I'm saying. It's quite well balanced with all the stuff it's got going on.
Yeah, I do agree that New York sense of place stuff is nice to have, but I mostly want a sense of Spider-Man in my Spider-Man media, to be honest, but that may just be my personal priorities. But yeah, as I say, I thought this was a decent Spider-Man show, not quite tripping over the line into stunning, amazing, wonderful, although it is possible that the second season might. There's a lot of solid base here, and it is definitely, especially if you are a Spider-Man liker, I do recommend it. It is a good time.
There's a lot of setup, so they can really start paying things off and things like that. And, this is good considering it has to do loads of setup. It'll be interesting the next season, when they don't have to do as much setup, what they run with. I'm excited for that.
Okay, and that was another Moderate Fantasy Violence Marvel special. Apologies to our listeners who enjoy it when we talk about things other than Marvel adaptations. But if you have enjoyed this episode, why not go to moderatefantasyviolence.com, where we have done many episodes about other things and even written some quite long articles about them as well. And if you've enjoyed any of this experience, please leave us a nice 5-star review. Thank you very much.
You can also follow us on various social media platforms, such as Twitter and Blue Sky, by searching for MFV Podcast, where you can get news about what we are up to, what we're watching, and any scheduled change to the program. So it doesn't happen frequently, but it did happen this time. Apologies for the COVID. But anyway, we got to talk about Spider-Man, which was lots of fun. And if you want to find out more from me, such as all the media I consumed whilst I had COVID, then you can follow me on Blue Sky, Twitter and Instagram by searching for Alastair Ball. You can also follow me on TikTok, where you can see my London adventures when I'm allowed outside the house. You can also get my writing at redtrainblog.com and my theatre reviews at everythingtheatre.com.
And you can follow me at nickbryan.com, that's with a dot on Blue Sky and with the word dot on Instagram, where I am mostly talking about my current Kickstarter for issue 2 of Sold, my cyberpunk fantasy action adventure comic currently crowdfunding. So yes, please come and join us on Kickstarter. We are, as of the release of this episode, very much into the midway quiet period of the campaign. So if you come and back us, I assure you, your one back could well make my day. So yep, come along, back Sold. I will put the link in the description and the website post for this episode. Thank you very much. Or you can just come back in 2 weeks' time for the next episode of Moderate Fantasy Violence, where at long last, after an excruciating wait of an extra 2 weeks, we will cover Sinners, as long as we can both manage to leave the house this time. And then also we will be returning to a long-standing MFV favourite. There is a new season of Love, Death and Robots, which means we're going to review it, and then I imagine we're going to count down our favourite episodes. So yep, join us in 2 weeks for that. Until then, bye-bye.
Bye.